Our second activity is called the Time Travel Challenge. In this activity, you've been given 10 years and 10 events. Now, all of these events are related to Georgia in the American Revolution. You'll be given 15 minutes to try to match your years with your events and put them together as a timeline on your desk. I would suggest you put the years in order first and then go through your events and try to figure out which events happened first and which ones happened later. This will help you match them up with the years. All right, teachers, at this point, pause the video and put 15 minutes on the clock. After the 15 minutes, play the video for the correct answers. Okay, you have your timelines completed. Was it a little bit challenging? Let's see how close you got to getting a correct timeline. Our first date is 1733. And the correct event for that year is the colony of Georgia is founded by the Georgia trustees. It was the last British colony and the only one to get money directly from the British government. Now, why do you think it's important to point out that Georgia was the 13th and final colony and that it received financial support directly from the British government? Well, it helps us understand why so many Georgians wanted to remain loyal to the British government, especially when hostilities first broke out in the American Revolution. They owed a lot of their success to the British government, and they were a little bit hesitant to break apart that relationship. Our second year is 1752. And in 1752, Georgia becomes a royal colony. A royal governor was sent to manage the colony, and slavery became legal for the first time in Georgia. Before 1752, Georgia was run by the Georgia trustees, and they had several rules, including a ban on slavery. Now, in 1752, the trustees gave up the charter, and the royal government took over. A lot of changes took place, but one of the most significant ones was making slavery legal. Our third year is 1754. This one's really important. The French and Indian War begins in North America. British colonists fought in the war along with Native Americans and British soldiers. England won the war, but left the country in debt when it ended in 1763. Now, it's important to know that when the French and Indian War ended, there was a lot of worry about how to pay for that conflict. And in our next year, we'll see that some of the ways the British decided to make up for that debt angered the colonists and really kicked off the American Revolution. So our next year, 1765, Parliament passes the Stamp Act. This was the first direct tax the colonists had ever been expected to pay. Georgia, interestingly, was the only colony where any stamps were used, but it did not last long. The Stamp Act was repealed in 1766. So you've probably heard the phrase, no taxation without representation. This was one of the main sticking points for the causes of the American Revolution. Georgia has an interesting history with the Stamp Act because Royal Governor James Wright was the only royal governor who successfully used the stamps before it was repealed. Our next major date is 1775. And in 1775, the first military action in the war takes place in Lexington and Concord. In response, some Georgians created a revolutionary government in opposition to the royal government, sent representatives to the Second Continental Congress, and boycotted British goods. This is a really important date because, as we talked about, Georgia was a little bit slower to join the American Revolution. Georgia didn't send representatives to that First Continental Congress, but they did to the Second, and one of the main reasons why was their anger over the events at Lexington and Concord. Our next date is one that everybody should have gotten right, and that's 1776. And of course, that's the year that the Declaration of Independence is approved by the Second Continental Congress in Philadelphia. Georgia's signers to the document were Gwinnett, Lyman and George Walton. And of course, that's why we celebrate Independence Day on July 4th, because it was July 4th, 1776. Our next date is 1779. This year was really important to the American Revolution in Georgia. Two very important battles happened in Georgia this year: the Battle of Kettle Creek in February and the Siege of Savannah in September and October. The Patriots won the Battle of Kettle Creek, but failed to take Savannah back from the British. The Siege of Savannah that year was a very costly campaign, and there were a lot of deaths. And in the end, the British were able to hold Savannah. It was also an interesting battle because it wasn't just the American forces fighting, but there was also French who were helping in the revolutionary cause. 1781, this is an important year because American forces win a great victory at Yorktown in Virginia. British General Cornwallis surrendered to General George Washington. This defeat leads directly to peace talks. Our next year is 1783. And this is the year the war officially ends, when representatives of the United States and Great Britain signed the Treaty of Paris. The agreement officially recognized the United States as an independent nation, which means that Georgia is a state in the United States of America instead of a colony in the British Empire. And our last and final date is 1787. In 1787, delegates complete and signed the Constitution of the United States of America. The Constitution became the law of the land in 1789. So there you have a brief timeline of 10 major events that help us better understand Georgia during the American Revolution.